how this is panning out for within the United States. Now, Apple will be investing an additional $100 billion in US manufacturing. And this is an announcement that's been made by Donald Trump alongside Tim Cook, the CEO of the tech giant. Now, this is, of course, coming about after Apple had pledged earlier this year $500 billion. So this is very important here, and that is because Trump has doubled down on his tariff strategy by threatening 100% tariffs on semiconductors and chips made internationally. So, of course, this is a part of making America, make America great again. That is something that we're seeing playing out here with Tim Cook. Listen into what Donald Trump and Tim Cook had to say and the reactions coming about.
Today, Apple is announcing that it will invest $600 billion, that's with a B, in the United States over the next 4 years. That's $100 billion more than they were originally going to invest. And this is the largest investment Apple has ever made in America and anywhere else. And it's just an honor to have you. As you know, Apple's been an investor in other countries a little bit. I won't say which ones, but a couple. And they're coming home. $600 billion. It's the biggest there is. The company is also unveiling its ambitious new American manufacturing program, which will bring factories and assembly lines across our country all roaring to life.
Earlier this year, we made our largest ever spending commitment, $500 billion to the U.S. over the next 4 years. That's already yielding results. Earlier this year, we broke ground on a new factory in Houston to make advanced AI servers. And just last month, the very first test unit rolled off that factory's line, proudly made in America. President Trump shared some kind words about that work, but he also asked us to think about what more we could commit to doing. And Mr. President, we took that challenge very seriously. I'm glad to be here with you today, and I'm very proud to say that today we're committing an additional $100 billion to the United States, bringing our total U.S. investment to $600 billion over the next 4 years.
And to know more on this, we have Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow of Strategic and International Studies. We also have Irina Sakkoman, President of the Analysts from New York Affairs, joining us as well. Let me take my first question to Jayant first. What does this mean for Indian exporters who are having sleepless nights? So what options do they have? Because this is literally a make or break for many people doing business with the United States.
Yeah, so actually for Indian exporters to the US, it's a big blow, undoubtedly. As you know, US is the only major country with whom we have a trade surplus in favor of India. And then US happens to be our second largest trading partner. So I think a quick estimate suggests that some of the products which have been kept out, like pharmaceuticals, like smartphones and semiconductors and so on and so forth, almost 25 to 30% of the total exports that US does to US, which are around $80 billion. Would not be affected, but out of the remaining amount, at least half of it would get affected because 50% tariff is very, very huge by any reckoning. It's absurd. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you look at the countries with whom we compete, their tariffs are anywhere between largely, if you leave China aside, they're largely between 10% to 20%. Look at European Union, which is 15%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, it's 19%. UK and Japan is 10%. South Korea is 15%, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, they're 20% bracket, So China is the only one which has 30%. It's a death blow for at least half of our exports to the US, which does not, which is not exempted from this tariff. And because, let me tell you, no export orders have this kind of a margin that, a 50% tariff could be adjusted through price reduction and so on and so forth, even export market today operates at rather thin margins and, it will not happen. And for some of the products which still go through with 50% tariff Indian products to the US, let me tell you who faces the blow. the US consumers, for consumer products, US consumers will pay a much higher price. That's number one. Number two, some of the industrial goods that India exports to the US, the industry would revolt. So I think it's going to damage both the countries very severely. I fail to understand why this simple wisdom doesn't dawn onto President Trump. He's in his pursuit to make America great again. I think he's going all over the place, and this war is being fought. Tariff war is being fought on Twitter, on his social media handle, rather than on negotiations. So I would still feel, because there's a huge dependence India has on the US, and also the fact that US is the highest FDI investor in India. I don't think we can retaliate. We don't have that kind of economic lever which China has, and it also shows. Let me tell you, President Trump's frustration, because U.S. economy is so heavily dependent on the Chinese economy. Therefore, the tariff is there at 30%. They can't go beyond this. Otherwise it will start hurting them. The leverage which India has is much lower, and that's a reason. Because of his frustration, India has become the soft target because China, the war was actually initially between US and China. But, the India has been hit because China is far too protected economically, and US has a huge dependence on China for it. I mean, look at the crude oil, export that Russia does. China buys more crude oil from Russia than what India does. But what is the logic?
China imports more oil, and of course that 90-day window that China has been given, and of course we've been seeing rounds and rounds of negotiation taking place. We are so close to a deal. But here, Irina, come in at this point. There's a meeting that's coming up with Putin, and that's going to be happening as early as next week, and possibly a meeting with Zelensky as well. Could that be a game changer if there is an end in sight as far as the war between Ukraine and Russia is concerned? Could that be a game changer for India as well?
I very much doubt it. I don't think the war is going to be put on end by Trump's meeting with Putin. We have seen absolutely no signal from the Kremlin about withdrawal from Ukraine. In fact, they are continuing to advance, and the fighting continues. The attacks on civilians continue, and there hasn't been even an effort to back away from that. Moreover, the Russian media, the state media, has recently put out a genocidal message calling for the elimination of all Ukrainians, which certainly doesn't seem like a sign of negotiation or diplomacy working. If anything, these meetings will probably focus on unilateral issues, possibly trade deals between Russia and the United States, or other sorts of limited negotiations not pertaining to the larger picture. To be honest, I don't think that the Russian oil is really the real reason for the 50% tariff at India. I think that is an excuse that Trump is trying to sell to his base in the United States in order to fend off criticism of his handling of Russia, and also the fact that U.S. continues to import a huge amount of metals from Russia, which essentially are funding Russia's war in Ukraine. As we speak, in fact, U.S. and the European Union have doubled the metal consumption over the past couple of years. And U.S. is yet to sanction aluminum, for instance, that's coming from Russia. It has sanctioned some of the oligarchs, but not the metal imports themselves.
Right. Thank you so much, Irina, for breaking it down for us, and Jayant Krishna for joining us this morning. Well.